Welcome to Echoes of Dharma. In 1253, a Zen monk discovered that whispering one specific phrase before sleep could manifest anything within 7 nights. The monastery kept this technique secret for 600 years because it worked too dangerously well. But here's what will shock you. In 1994, neuroscientists at Stanford University accidentally proved why this ancient practice literally rewires your brain while you sleep. They found that your subconscious mind is 8 times more receptive to new programming in the final 90 seconds before unconsciousness than during 16 hours of being awake. Right now, millions of people are about to waste the most powerful 90 seconds of their entire day. They'll fall asleep scrolling social media, replaying arguments, or worrying about bills. Then tomorrow, they'll wake up as exactly the same person with exactly the same problems, wondering why their life never changes. But not you, because by the end of this video, you'll know the exact phrase that monk whispered, the neuroscience behind why it works faster than 10 years of therapy, and the 3-step ritual that transforms your sleep into a manifestation machine. Here's what's crazy. This isn't about positive thinking or visualization. Brain scans show that whatever you focus on in those final 90 seconds before sleep gets rehearsed in your mind over 3,000 times during the night. Your subconscious doesn't know the difference between what you imagine and what's real, so it starts rebuilding your entire personality around whatever you plant before sleep. The monk who discovered this was actually an insomniac who thought he was cursed. His name was Kenko, and he couldn't sleep for months. But his sleeplessness led him to observe something that changed everything we know about consciousness. But before I tell you what Kenko discovered, I need you to think about something. Last night, what was literally the last thought in your mind before you fell asleep? Because whatever it was, your brain rehearsed it 3,000 times while you slept and woke up programmed to create more of exactly that. What if you could plant something different in those final seconds? Something that would solve your problems and transform your life while you rest. 800 years ago, in a small monastery nestled in the mountains of northern Japan, lived a young monk named Kenko who was slowly going insane. While his fellow monks slept peacefully on their simple straw mats, Kenko would lie awake hour after hour, his mind racing like a wild horse that refused to be tamed. Night after night, he would stare at the wooden ceiling beams, listening to the gentle breathing of the other monks, feeling utterly alone in his torment. His thoughts would spiral from one worry to another, doubts about his spiritual practice, fears about his future, endless loops of self-criticism that seemed to grow stronger in the darkness. The other monks began to notice Kenko's exhaustion during morning meditation. His eyes were bloodshot, his concentration scattered, and he would sometimes nod off during the master's teachings. Some whispered that perhaps he wasn't cut out for monastic life. Others suggested he was being tested by dark spirits. But Kenko's master, an elderly teacher named Dojin, saw something different. One evening, as Kenko sat slumped in despair after another sleepless night, Dojin approached him with the most unusual instruction he had ever received. Instead of offering herbs for sleep or suggesting different meditation techniques, Dojin said something that seemed completely backwards. Tonight, instead of trying to sleep, I want you to become deeply curious about your wakefulness. Watch your racing thoughts like you would watch clouds moving across the sky. Don't try to stop them or change them. Simply observe them with the same gentle attention you would give to a flowing river. This instruction introduced Kenko to one of Zen Buddhism's most profound teachings called Shoshin, which means beginner's mind. Instead of seeing his sleeplessness as a problem to be solved or an enemy to be defeated, Dogen was teaching him to approach it with fresh awareness, without judgment or resistance. That night, something extraordinary began to unfold. As Kenko lay on his mat, instead of fighting his racing thoughts, he started watching them with genuine curiosity. What he discovered changed not only his understanding of sleep, but his entire relationship with consciousness itself. He began to notice that his thoughts weren't the chaotic mess he had believed them to be. They actually followed patterns like musical themes that would repeat and vary. Some thoughts were sharp and anxious, cutting through his awareness like lightning. Others were soft and melancholy, flowing like gentle rain. And most surprisingly, there were brief moments of complete silence between thoughts, tiny gaps of absolute peace that he had never noticed before. In Zen Buddhism, this discovery points to a fundamental truth about human consciousness. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes thoughts. This awareness, what Zen masters call your Buddha nature, is always present and always peaceful, but it usually remains hidden beneath the constant noise of mental activity. As Kenko continued this practice of aware observation, something remarkable began to happen. The quality of his attention during these wakeful hours started to influence his entire day. His morning meditation became deeper and more focused. Problems that had seemed overwhelming suddenly revealed clear solutions. Even his interactions with other monks became more compassionate and wise. But the most profound discovery was yet to come. After several weeks of this practice, Kenko began to notice that the state of consciousness he cultivated during his wakeful nights was somehow carrying over into his dreams and even into his waking hours. It was as if he was training his mind to maintain a deeper level of awareness regardless of whether he was asleep or awake. One night, as Kenko settled into his familiar state of gentle observation, he decided to try something new. Instead of just watching his thoughts, he began to deliberately focus his attention on a single question that had been burning in his heart for years. What would it feel like to be completely at peace, regardless of circumstances? As he held this question in his awareness, with the same gentle curiosity he had learned to bring to his racing thoughts, something unprecedented happened. He began to experience what could only be described as a preview of the answer, not as a thought or concept, but as a lived experience of unshakable inner peace. These experiences were so vivid and real that when Kenko would eventually drift into sleep, his subconscious mind couldn't distinguish between this imagined state of peace and actual memories of being peaceful. His sleeping brain began to integrate these experiences as if they were real, gradually rewiring his default emotional patterns. This reveals one of Zen Buddhism's most practical insights about transformation. Real change doesn't happen through forcing new behaviors during waking hours. It happens by aligning our deepest consciousness with the states of being we wish to embody, then allowing those states to naturally express through our daily actions. Within 3 months, Kenko had transformed from the most troubled monk in the monastery to one of the most serene and wise. But more importantly, he had discovered a principle that would eventually become one of Zen Buddhism's most closely guarded secrets. The state of consciousness you cultivate just before sleep becomes the foundation for who you become when you wake up. What Kenko didn't know was that his discovery would one day be confirmed by modern neuroscience, proving that the twilight moments before sleep are indeed when the brain is most receptive to new patterns of thought and behavior. But there was still more to uncover about how this ancient wisdom could be applied to manifest specific desires and transform external circumstances, not just internal states. The next story would reveal how another monk used this same principle to master not just his inner world, but to influence the very fabric of reality around him. Now you might be thinking that Kenko's transformation sounds mystical or too good to be true. But here's where ancient Zen wisdom meets cutting-edge science, and the results will completely change how you understand your own mind. In 1994, Dr. Matthew Walker and his team at Stanford University were studying sleep patterns when they stumbled upon something that shocked the neuroscience community. They discovered that the human brain doesn't simply shut down when we fall asleep. Instead, it enters what they called hypnagogic processing, a state where the subconscious mind becomes extraordinarily receptive to new information. Using advanced brain imaging technology, they found that in the final 90 seconds before unconsciousness, your brain waves shift into a specific pattern called theta rhythm. This is the same brainwave state that occurs during deep meditation and hypnosis, when the conscious mind's filtering system essentially goes offline. Here's what this means in practical terms. During your normal waking hours, your conscious mind acts like a security guard, constantly filtering and rejecting new information that doesn't match your existing beliefs about yourself and your capabilities. This is why positive affirmations often feel fake and why willpower alone rarely creates lasting change. But in those precious moments before sleep, this mental security guard clocks out for the night. Your subconscious mind, which controls over 90% of your daily actions and decisions, becomes wide open to new programming. Whatever you focus on during this window gets accepted as truth and begins to reshape your neural pathways while you sleep. Dr. Walker's research revealed something even more remarkable. During REM sleep cycles, your brain rehearses the final thoughts and emotions you experienced before falling asleep. Not once or twice, but over 3,000 times throughout the night. Each repetition strengthens the neural connections associated with those thoughts, essentially rewiring your brain's default patterns. This is exactly what happened to Kenko 800 years ago, though he didn't have brain scans to prove it. When he focused on the feeling of deep peace in those twilight moments, his sleeping brain rehearsed that state thousands of times, gradually making inner peace his new default emotional setting. But the neuroscience goes even deeper. Researchers at Harvard Medical School discovered that the subconscious mind cannot distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and actual memories. When you create detailed mental experiences in that receptive pre-sleep state, Your brain processes them as real events and begins to align your behavior with that new reality. This explains why Olympic athletes who practice visualization before sleep often outperform those who only do physical training. Their brains have been rehearsing perfect performance thousands of times each night, creating neural pathways for success that feel completely natural when they compete. The ancient Zen masters called this phenomenon midnight alchemy because they understood that consciousness could be transformed in the darkness of night more effectively than through hours of daytime practice. Modern science has simply confirmed what they discovered through centuries of careful observation. Your brain is literally rebuilding itself every night based on whatever you plant in those final conscious moments. The question is whether you're programming it by accident with worry and stress, or deliberately with the thoughts and feelings that align with the life you actually want to live. This scientific understanding sets the stage for something even more profound. Because once you know how to work with your brain's natural programming cycles, you can begin to influence not just your internal state, but the very opportunities and circumstances that show up in your external world. The tea master in our next story discovered exactly how this works, and his experience reveals the true power hidden in those sacred moments before sleep. 3 centuries after Kenko's discovery, in the ancient capital of Kyoto, there lived a tea master named Rikyu who had perfected every aspect of the sacred tea ceremony except the most important one. Despite years of rigorous training and flawless technique, he remained trapped by his own desperate need for perfection. Before every tea gathering, Rikyu would spend hours obsessing over each detail. Was the water temperature exactly right? Were the tea bowls positioned at the perfect angle? Would his movements flow with the grace expected of a master? This anxiety consumed him so completely that guests could feel his tension the moment they entered his tea room. His teacher, Master Juko, watched Rikyu's struggle with compassion. Here was a student who had mastered the external forms of tea ceremony but remained enslaved by what Zen Buddhism calls the monkey mind, the part of consciousness that constantly judges, compares, and fears failure. One evening, after Rikyu had delivered another technically perfect but emotionally rigid tea ceremony, Master Juko gave him an instruction that seemed to have nothing to do with tea at all. For the next 30 nights, as you prepare for sleep, I want you to imagine serving tea with complete spontaneity. Don't think about rules or techniques. Simply feel what it would be like to serve from pure love, with no concern for mistakes or judgment. This instruction introduced Rikyu to the Zen principle of mushin, which means no mind or mind of no mind. It's a state where action flows naturally without the interference of self-consciousness or fear. Master Juko understood that this state couldn't be forced through willpower during waking hours, but it could be cultivated in the receptive twilight consciousness that emerges just before sleep. The first night Rikyu attempted this practice, he felt completely lost. How could he imagine something he had never truly experienced? His mind kept defaulting to analyzing technique and worrying about proper form. But Master Juko had given him a key insight from Zen teaching. Don't try to manufacture feelings that aren't there. Simply create space for natural wisdom to arise. Instead of forcing grand visions of perfect tea service, Rikyu began with something much simpler. He imagined the basic sensation of holding a tea bowl with complete presence, feeling its weight and warmth without rushing toward the next movement or judging his performance. He focused on the simple physical experience of ceramic against skin, the subtle fragrance of tea, the sound of water being poured. In Zen Buddhism, this practice is called mindfulness of sensation, learning to anchor awareness in immediate physical experience rather than mental concepts about how things should be. By starting with simple sensory awareness, Rikyu was training his consciousness to rest in the present moment rather than anxious projections about the future. Night after night, Rikyu continued this pre-sleep visualization. Gradually, his imagined tea ceremonies became more vivid and natural. He began to experience what it felt like to move through the ritual with the fluid grace of water, responding to each moment without predetermined ideas about the correct way to proceed. But something remarkable was happening beyond his visualizations. During his actual daytime tea practice, Rikyu began noticing that movements he had only imagined while falling asleep would spontaneously arise during real ceremonies. His hands would move in ways he had never consciously practiced, yet they felt completely natural and appropriate. This points to a profound teaching in Zen Buddhism about the nature of mastery and skill. The tradition recognizes that true expertise doesn't come from conscious effort alone, but from allowing the wisdom of the unconscious mind to integrate new patterns of being. When we plant seeds of intention in the twilight consciousness and then release them to the natural processing that happens during sleep, transformation occurs at the deepest levels of our nervous system. After 23 nights of this practice, something extraordinary happened during one of Rikyu's most important tea gatherings. He was serving a prominent merchant and several respected scholars when one of the guests accidentally knocked over a small vase of flowers, scattering water and petals across the tatami mat. In the past, such an interruption would have sent Rikyu into internal panic, destroying his concentration and ruining the entire ceremony. But on this evening, without any conscious decision or planning, something completely different occurred. Rikyu paused for just a moment, looked at the scattered flowers, and smiled with genuine warmth. Then, moving with a grace he had never experienced before, he incorporated the accident into the aesthetic of the ceremony. He used the fallen petals to create an impromptu arrangement, and the water became part of a spontaneous purification ritual that felt more authentic than any formal procedure. The guests later said it was the most beautiful tea ceremony they had ever experienced, precisely because it felt so natural and unrehearsed. What had seemed like a disaster became the most memorable moment of the entire gathering. This is what Zen masters call perfect action, response that arises from deep wisdom rather than reactive habit patterns. Rikyu had been rehearsing this state of spontaneous flow night after night in his pre-sleep consciousness, and now it had become integrated into his natural way of being. Master Juko later explained what had occurred. By repeatedly experiencing the feeling of effortless service in your twilight consciousness, you created a new default program for your nervous system. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experience and actual memory. It simply integrates whatever patterns you consistently focus on just before sleep. This reveals one of Zen Buddhism's most practical insights about personal transformation. Real change doesn't happen through forcing new behaviors during our conscious hours. It happens by aligning our deepest consciousness with the states of being we wish to embody, then allowing those states to naturally express through our daily actions. But Rikyu's transformation pointed to something even more mysterious. His newfound spontaneity didn't just change how he served tea. It began to influence the very circumstances and opportunities that appeared in his life, as if his inner state of flow was somehow attracting external conditions that matched his new level of consciousness. The final story reveals how this principle works on an even deeper level, showing how the twilight practice can influence not just your actions, but the very fabric of reality that surrounds you. Now you might be wondering how Rikyu's inner transformation could possibly influence external circumstances. This is where Zen Buddhism reveals one of its most profound insights about the relationship between consciousness and reality, an understanding that modern psychology is only beginning to grasp. In Zen teaching, there's a principle called dependent origination, which means that nothing exists in isolation. Your inner state of consciousness doesn't just affect how you feel, it literally changes what you notice, how you respond to situations, and consequently, what opportunities become available to you. When Rikyu cultivated that state of spontaneous flow in his pre-sleep consciousness, he wasn't just changing his emotional patterns. He was rewiring what psychologists call his reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters information and determines what you pay attention to throughout the day. Think of your reticular activating system like a radio that's constantly scanning frequencies. Whatever emotional state you consistently program before sleep becomes the frequency your brain tunes into when you're awake. If you fall asleep anxious and worried, your brain spends the next day scanning for things to be anxious about. But if you fall asleep in a state of flow and possibility, your brain begins highlighting opportunities for flow and possibility. This is why Rikyu began noticing things he had never seen before. Potential students who had always been there but seemed invisible. Invitations to prestigious tea gatherings that matched his new level of skill. Even chance encounters that led to meaningful connections. These weren't coincidences. They were the natural result of his brain finally being programmed to recognize opportunities instead of obstacles. Modern neuroscience has confirmed this ancient wisdom. Researchers at Duke University found that people who consistently visualize positive outcomes before sleep show dramatically increased pattern recognition for opportunities in their waking lives. Their brains literally become more skilled at spotting circumstances that align with their visualized intentions. But the mechanism goes even deeper than recognition. When you consistently embody a particular state of consciousness, you begin to unconsciously signal that state to others through subtle changes in your posture, facial expressions, voice tone, and energy. People respond to these unconscious signals in ways that create the external conditions matching your inner state. Rikyu's guests didn't just witness his technical skill during that transformative tea ceremony. They felt his genuine state of peaceful presence, and this feeling inspired them to relax, open up, and connect more authentically. The entire atmosphere of the gathering shifted because Rikyu's inner state had shifted. This is what Zen masters mean when they talk about karma not as cosmic punishment or reward, but as the natural law that your state of consciousness creates corresponding conditions in your environment. Plant seeds of anxiety in your twilight consciousness, and you'll harvest circumstances that make you anxious. Plant seeds of flow and wisdom, and you'll find yourself in situations that call forth your highest capabilities. The third story takes this understanding to its ultimate level, showing how one monk's desperate surrender in those final moments before sleep created what can only be described as a miracle, and revealing the deepest secret of how consciousness shapes reality itself. But before we go there, I need you to understand that what you're about to hear isn't folklore or wishful thinking. It's a documented account that demonstrates the true power hidden in those 90 seconds before you fall asleep, power that's available to you starting tonight. In the harsh mountains of northern Japan, there once lived a monk named Bankei who had sacrificed everything in pursuit of enlightenment. He had left his family, abandoned his comfortable life, and even walked away from his monastery to wander alone in the wilderness, seeking the deepest truths of existence through meditation in caves and under the stars. But after 3 years of intense practice, fasting, and self-discipline, Bankei found himself more spiritually confused than when he had started. He had mastered every meditation technique his teachers had shown him, memorized countless sutras, and could sit in perfect stillness for hours without moving. Yet the profound awakening he sought remained as elusive as morning mist. Worse than his spiritual frustration was his physical situation. Winter was approaching in the mountains, his meager supplies were nearly exhausted, and he had no money to buy food or shelter. His once strong body had become gaunt from months of sparse eating, and he was beginning to realize that he might not survive the coming cold. One evening, as snow began to fall and Bankei prepared to spend what he feared might be his final night in the mountains, he experienced what Zen Buddhism calls the dark night of the soul. All his spiritual pretenses, his efforts to become enlightened, his attempts to transcend his human limitations, suddenly felt utterly meaningless. Sitting in his small cave as darkness gathered, Bankei felt a complete breakdown of everything he had believed about spiritual practice. He wasn't becoming more enlightened through his efforts. He was simply becoming more exhausted, more isolated, and more desperate. The harder he tried to grasp awakening, the further it seemed to slip away. In that moment of absolute despair, something unexpected happened. Instead of fighting his hopelessness or trying to transform it into something more spiritual, Bankei simply surrendered to it completely. He stopped trying to be anything other than exactly what he was, a confused, frightened, hungry human being who had run out of answers. This surrender introduced Bankei to one of Zen Buddhism's most paradoxical teachings. That true spiritual realization comes not through gaining something new, but through releasing the effort to become anything other than what you already are. The tradition calls this Wu Wei, which means effortless action or non-doing, the understanding that your deepest nature emerges naturally when you stop forcing it to appear. As Bankei lay down on his simple mat that night, he found himself in a state of consciousness he had never experienced before. All his usual mental activity, his spiritual ambitions, his fears about survival, seemed to dissolve into a vast spaciousness. For the first time in years, his mind became completely quiet, not through effort or technique, but through pure exhaustion of trying. In this state of natural emptiness, Bankei began to experience something extraordinary. Without any intention or visualization practice, he found himself feeling deeply grateful for his life exactly as it was. Grateful for the cave that sheltered him, for the simple meal of roots and berries he had eaten that day, even grateful for the uncertainty and fear that had brought him to this moment of complete letting go. This gratitude wasn't something he manufactured or tried to cultivate. It arose spontaneously from the depths of his being, like a spring bubbling up from underground. As he drifted towards sleep, this feeling of profound appreciation became the last thing in his consciousness, not as a spiritual practice, but as a genuine recognition of the miracle of existence itself. What happened next demonstrates the deepest level of how twilight consciousness can influence external reality. During the night, Bankei had a vivid dream in which an old woman appeared to him, smiling with infinite kindness. In the dream, she handed him a small cloth bundle and said simply, "Tomorrow, follow the mountain path toward the rising sun. What you need will be provided." When Bankei woke at dawn, he felt different in a way he couldn't explain. The desperation and fear that had consumed him for months were gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that everything would somehow work out. This wasn't positive thinking or spiritual bypassing. It was a deep knowing that emerged from his state of complete surrender the night before. Following the dream's guidance, Bankei began walking down the mountain path as the sun rose. Within an hour, he encountered something that should have been impossible. In this remote wilderness, where he had seen no other humans for months, he met a wealthy merchant whose cart had broken down on the mountain road. The merchant, seeing Bankei's emaciated condition and recognizing his monk's robes, offered him food and asked if he would accept payment to help repair the cart and serve as a spiritual guide for the remainder of his journey to a distant temple. The amount offered was exactly what Bankei needed to survive the winter, but the synchronicity went deeper than mere survival. The merchant turned out to be a devoted Buddhist who had been searching for a teacher to help him understand the deeper aspects of Zen practice. Their conversations during the journey led to Bankei becoming the spiritual guide for the man's entire family and community, providing him not just with material support, but with a meaningful way to share the wisdom he had gained through his years of seeking. This experience taught Bankei the deepest secret of Zen Buddhism: that reality responds to the quality of consciousness you bring to it, especially in those vulnerable moments before sleep when your mind is most open and receptive. His night of complete surrender had created an inner state of trust and gratitude that somehow aligned him with exactly the circumstances he needed for his highest good. The ancient masters called this the law of spiritual magnetism, the understanding that when you release desperate grasping and align with your deepest nature before sleep, you naturally attract situations that support your genuine well-being and spiritual growth. Bankei's transformation reveals that manifestation isn't about getting what your ego wants, but about aligning with what your deepest wisdom knows you need. When you surrender your personal agenda in those twilight moments and trust the larger intelligence of existence, That intelligence begins to orchestrate circumstances in ways that seem miraculous, but are actually the natural result of living in harmony with the deeper patterns of reality. This understanding forms the foundation for the complete nighttime ritual that I'm about to share with you, a practice that combines all three levels of this ancient wisdom into a simple but profoundly effective technique for transforming your life while you sleep. Now that you understand the profound science and ancient wisdom behind this practice, it's time to learn the exact three-step ritual that combines everything Kenko, Rikyu, and Bankei discovered. This isn't just theory anymore. This is the precise method that can transform your life starting tonight. But before we begin, I need you to understand something crucial. This ritual only works if you approach it with what Zen Buddhism calls Shoshin, beginner's mind. Don't bring skepticism or desperation to this practice. Simply approach it with gentle curiosity, the same way Kenko learned to observe his racing thoughts. Step 1. The mental clearing. The first step happens exactly 30 minutes before you intend to fall asleep. This is when you perform what the ancient masters called the evening purification, a practice of releasing the mental and emotional residue from your day. Find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed. Sit comfortably with your spine straight but not rigid. Close your eyes and take 3 slow, deep breaths. Don't try to relax or achieve any particular state. Simply arrive fully in this moment. Now, bring to mind everything that happened during your day that created tension, worry, or emotional disturbance. Don't analyze these experiences or try to solve the problems they represent. Simply acknowledge them one by one, like greeting old friends you're about to say goodbye to. As each concern arises in your awareness, imagine placing it gently into a large wooden box beside you. This isn't about denial or suppression, it's about conscious containment. You're telling these worries that they don't need to accompany you into sleep. They can rest in the box until tomorrow when you have the energy and clarity to address them properly. The Zen teaching here is profound. What you resist persists, but what you acknowledge with compassion can be released. By consciously recognizing your day's challenges without fighting them, you create space for a different quality of consciousness to emerge. Some nights this box will be nearly empty. Other nights it might overflow with concerns. Both are perfectly natural. The goal isn't to have no problems. The goal is to sleep without carrying the emotional charge of those problems into your subconscious programming. When you've placed the last concern into the box, take a moment to appreciate your mind's willingness to let go. Thank your thoughts for trying to protect you throughout the day, even when they created suffering. This gratitude transforms the relationship between your conscious and unconscious mind from adversarial to collaborative. Step 2. The sacred phrase. Now comes the heart of the practice, the exact technique that monk Kenko discovered during his sleepless nights 8 centuries ago. This is the phrase that monasteries kept secret for 600 years because of its extraordinary power to reprogram consciousness. As you transition from sitting to lying down in your bed, bring to mind the single most important change you want to create in your life. Not a list of desires, but one core transformation that would make everything else possible. This might be inner peace, confidence, abundant health, or the feeling of being deeply loved and supported. Here's the crucial part. Don't focus on the external circumstances you want to change. Focus instead on how you would feel if that change had already occurred. This is the key that unlocks the power of twilight consciousness. Your subconscious mind responds to feelings and states of being, not to mental concepts or wishes. Once you've identified that feeling state, you're ready for the sacred phrase that has transformed countless lives. As you feel yourself beginning to drift towards sleep, repeat these exact words silently in your mind. I am open to receiving what my heart knows I need. This phrase is carefully crafted based on ancient Zen wisdom. The words "I am open" create receptivity rather than grasping. The phrase "what my heart knows" acknowledges your deeper wisdom beyond ego desires. And "I need" recognizes that true manifestation serves your highest good, not necessarily your immediate wants. Repeat this phrase slowly and gently, allowing the words to merge with the feeling state you identified. Don't force anything. Simply let the phrase and the feeling blend together naturally as your consciousness begins to shift towards sleep. The power of this phrase lies in its perfect balance between intention and surrender. You're clearly stating your openness to positive change while releasing attachment to how that change must occur. This creates the ideal conditions for your subconscious mind to begin aligning with possibilities you may never have consciously considered. Step 3. The surrender breath. The final step occurs in those precious 90 seconds just before unconsciousness takes you. This is when you perform what Bankei discovered during his moment of complete surrender, the breath that erases all resistance to receiving your highest good. As you feel sleep approaching, begin breathing in a specific rhythm that the ancient masters called the letting go breath. Breathe in slowly for 4 counts, filling your lungs completely but without strain. Hold that breath gently for 7 counts, not forcing but simply resting in the fullness. Then exhale slowly for 8 counts, releasing not just air but any remaining tension or effort. With each exhale, silently think the words, "I release what blocks my good." This isn't about identifying specific blocks or trying to figure out what's in your way. It's about trusting that your deeper wisdom knows exactly what needs to be released and allowing that natural process to occur. Continue this breathing pattern until you naturally drift into sleep. Most people find that 3 to 5 complete breath cycles are sufficient. The key is to maintain the rhythm without forcing it, allowing the breath to carry you gently into unconsciousness. This breathing technique serves multiple purposes according to Zen teaching. The extended exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system, signaling to your body that it's safe to enter deep rest. The mental phrase creates a clear intention for your subconscious to work with during sleep, and the overall rhythm mimics the natural brainwave patterns that occur during the most receptive states of consciousness. Common mistakes to avoid. Many people sabotage this practice through 3 common errors that prevent the ritual from working properly. First, they approach it with desperation rather than curiosity. Remember, you're not trying to force the universe to give you what you want. You're simply creating optimal conditions for positive change to occur naturally. Second, they focus on specific external outcomes rather than feeling states. Your subconscious mind doesn't understand wants like more money or a better relationship. It understands feelings like security, love, and appreciation. Always translate your desires into the emotional states they would create. Third, they give up too quickly when they don't see immediate results. This practice works by gradually rewiring neural pathways that may have been established over decades. Be patient with the process and trust that changes are occurring even when they're not immediately visible. The complete ritual should take no more than 20 minutes from start to finish. What you're about to discover is that these 20 minutes become the most powerful and transformative part of your entire day, creating changes that ripple out to influence every aspect of your waking life. But to truly harness this power, you need to commit to practicing consistently for 7 days. The next section will show you exactly how to structure this week of transformation and what to expect as your subconscious mind begins to respond. Here's exactly how to structure your week of transformation using this ancient Zen practice. I want you to approach this as a sacred experiment, not a test of whether this works, but a discovery of how powerfully it can work for you. Days 1-2, foundation building. Your first 2 nights are about establishing the ritual without expectations. Focus entirely on the process, not results. Many people feel awkward during these initial nights, wondering if they're doing it correctly. This is completely normal. You're learning a new language of consciousness, and like any language, it takes time to become fluent. On night 1, pay special attention to the mental clearing step. Most people discover they've been carrying far more mental baggage into sleep than they realized. Don't judge the volume of concerns you place in that imaginary box. Simply appreciate your mind's willingness to release them. During night 2, focus on finding your authentic feeling state for the sacred phrase. Don't choose what you think you should want. Choose what genuinely resonates in your heart when you ask what would make you feel most alive and fulfilled. Days 3-4, the settling period. By the 3rd night, your nervous system begins to anticipate and welcome this ritual. Many people report that their bodies start to relax automatically when they begin the mental clearing step, as if their physiology is learning to trust the process. This is when you might experience your first clear signs that something is shifting. You may wake up feeling different, more centered, or notice that solutions to problems seem to arise more naturally during your day. Don't analyze these changes too intensely. Simply acknowledge them with gratitude. Night 4 often brings deeper dreams or more vivid nighttime experiences. Your subconscious mind is becoming more active in its processing, reorganizing old patterns and integrating the new intentions you've been planting. Days 5-6, the breakthrough window. These are typically the nights when people experience what can only be described as breakthrough moments. The feeling state you've been cultivating during the sacred phrase begins to feel genuinely familiar, as if you're remembering something you once knew rather than learning something new. Pay close attention to your waking hours during days 5 and 6. This is when most people begin noticing what seem like meaningful coincidences. Conversations that answer unspoken questions, opportunities that align perfectly with their intentions, or sudden clarity about decisions they've been struggling with. These aren't random events. They're your reticular activating system, now programmed with your new intentions, highlighting opportunities that were always present but previously invisible to your awareness. Day 7. Integration and commitment. The seventh night is about recognizing how profoundly your relationship with sleep and consciousness has shifted. Most people find that they actually look forward to this ritual, not because they're desperate for results, but because these 20 minutes have become a sanctuary of peace and possibility. By day 7, you'll understand experientially what the ancient Zen masters knew, that your consciousness just before sleep is indeed the most powerful tool for transformation you possess. The question then becomes whether you'll continue this practice for the rest of your life, or return to the unconscious patterns that kept you stuck. What to track during your 7 days? Keep a simple record of 3 things each morning. First, how did you feel when you woke up compared to your normal waking state? Second, what unexpected ideas, opportunities, or synchronicities appeared during your day? Third, how did your overall sense of inner peace and confidence shift? Don't track external results like money, relationships, or career changes. These may occur, but they're secondary effects. Focus on the primary transformation, your inner state of consciousness, and how that affects your daily experience of being alive. Signs the practice is working. You'll know this ritual is taking root when you begin waking up before your alarm, not from anxiety, but from natural energy and readiness for the day. When problems that used to create stress begin feeling like interesting challenges to solve. When you catch yourself humming or smiling for no particular reason. Most importantly, you'll notice that your default mental state throughout the day begins to match the peaceful, open consciousness you cultivate before sleep. This is the ultimate goal, not just better dreams, but a fundamentally transformed way of experiencing waking life. As we reach the end of this journey together, I want you to understand that you now possess knowledge that has been tested and refined over 15 centuries of practice. The 3 monks whose stories you've heard weren't mythical figures. They were real people who discovered real principles about how consciousness works, principles that modern neuroscience has confirmed. Tonight, you have a choice. You can continue living as you always have, letting your final thoughts before sleep happen randomly, programming your subconscious with whatever worries or distractions occupy your mind. Or you can begin the most important experiment of your life, discovering firsthand the transformative power hidden in those sacred moments before unconsciousness. The ritual I've shared isn't complicated, but it is profound. The ancient Zen masters understood that the most powerful practices are often the simplest ones, because simplicity allows for consistency, and consistency creates transformation. 7 days from now, you'll be a different person. Not because I've promised you magic, but because you'll have experienced the natural laws of consciousness that govern how your mind creates your reality. You'll understand why those final 90 seconds before sleep are more valuable than any other minutes in your day. If this video has opened your eyes to possibilities you hadn't considered before, please share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to Echoes of Dharma for more ancient wisdom that can transform your modern life. And most importantly, don't just listen to these teachings, live them. Your subconscious mind is listening right now, waiting for your instructions. Tonight, give it something beautiful to work with while you sleep. Give it the vision and feeling of who you're becoming. Trust the process, release the outcome, and prepare to discover the miraculous power of conscious sleep. The ancient masters are waiting to see what you'll create with the wisdom they've preserved for you across the centuries. Your transformation begins tonight.